it's S.J. Thomason with Christian-apologist.com, and I'm here with G-Man, and we are going to review a really exciting video today that was between the deceased Christopher Hitchens, who's an atheist, and who was an atheist, I should say he's not anymore, and Frank Turek, who is a Christian, and G-Man and I are going to review this debate. We're actually going to really focus on Christopher Hitchens' portion of the debate and how it's flawed. And so we're going to do that. And but without further ado, let me first introduce G-Man to you. If you haven't met him yet, he's quite a famous YouTuber. And G-Man?
All right. So hello, everybody. Welcome to S.J. Thomason's channel. This is Coffee, and I think this is Coffee with G-Man and S.J. Yep. And I'm looking forward to looking over this debate because a lot of people know that Christopher Hitchens created something called the Hitch slap. You know what I mean? And I'm looking forward to hearing his arguments that are so good that's going to cause so many of us to think and evaluate our Christianity and to become like him. I'm dying to hear this.
Yep, he's dying to hear it. And so I want to say who I just preface this, Frank Turek, the Christian who's in this particular debate. Now, he still does a lot of debates. I've heard him debate David Silverman, and I made a commentary on that video before. And actually, one of the first Christian apologist books that I read was by Frank Turek, and it was called Stealing from God. And he talks about how atheists want to have their cake and eat it too. And so they like our Christian principles and our ideas of equality for all, equality of opportunities for everybody. A lot of people like those ideas, and they also like a lot of our other Christian ideas, and they try to wrap those in what they call secular humanism. So it's taking all of our good ideas and then pretending there wasn't a moral lawgiver who sourced them. So his book was a lot about that. I would really actually recommend that. And the Lubis says he's never heard of the Hitch slap. Do you want to explain that even more, the Hitch slap?
If Lubis, if you want, you can just type it on YouTube. You can talk, because basically what it is what I would call the G-smack. If I'm going to debate somebody and I want to make a point and I want to show everybody that I'm right about that point and there's no refuting it, I would call that a G-smack. He did the same thing with his argumentation. He thought he did such a great job that he'll hit you with such logic and such wisdom and such reason, you know what I mean, that you wouldn't be able to respond to him because, you know, that's how we roll. But just look it up, Lubis. You'll see it.
Yeah, okay, so we'll do that. I'm trying to turn my phone off here because I've got the volume on my phone. Hold on.
Okay, let me see.
Okay, can't seem to get the volume off my phone. Okay, so here we go. Let's go ahead and we're going to see if he does a hitch slap. So is there going to be a hitch slap? Are we going to see one? G-Man and I are going to go to that next. Oops, I forgot to turn.
We better be careful. We might become atheists after listening to him. I mean,
yeah, we have to watch out. If we become atheists, if it's such a powerful argument that he's going to make that it's going to turn us into atheists, is that even possible? I mean,
let's see what happens. Yes.
If it's a really good argument, you never know. You never know, right?
Yeah.
Right, G-Man?
Yep. Okay, I'll make a video tomorrow saying I'm an atheist. Yeah.
If it's a really good argument. So what I did here is I zoomed ahead. I got us right in front of the Hitch slap, his portion of this debate. So again, you can go to Frank Turek's book, Stealing from God, and probably get a lot of his big arguments. He has arguments, a whole bunch of arguments on for Christian beliefs. And so you can go into those. He talks about it, the cosmological, the teleological, the purpose-driven argument, Jesus's resurrection. He goes into great detail on mere Christianity and talks about C.S. Lewis. So all those great things. So you definitely want to watch that. But we're going to review this portion. So this is Christopher Hitchens' first 20 minutes. So you ready with that there, G-Man?
Yes, let's do this.
All right. So I'm hitting the computer sound here. All right, here we go.
Let's see. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming. Thank you, Dr. Turek, for that very spirited opening to the evening. I should say first, it's a great honor to be in the capital of the great state of Virginia. I'm, in a small way, a biographer of Thomas Jefferson, and his memorial, as you know, omitted the mention of his presidencies and vice presidencies and preferred to focus on his work at the university and his authorship of the Virginia Statute on Religious Freedom, which is the embryo and basis of the First Amendment to our Constitution, which makes this the only country in the world that has ever decided that God and constitutional matters should be separated. And it's in defense partly of that civilizational impulse that I rise this evening to satirize the idea that we're here by somebody else's permission and owe that person an explanation, which is what it is to be a theist, if not a deist at any rate. I almost never watch television, and I'm usually glad that I don't, but now I'm glad that I'm forced by my daughter to watch Family Guy. Because you may possibly have seen the moment when the chubby father comes down in the morning and looks at his cereal in the bowl, accepting one of your more sophisticated challenges, sir. And he says, "Look at this," it says, "woo, woo, 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 woo." And his daughter says, "Those are Cheerios, Dad." But I accept the ontological challenge. And I accept it in this way. The answer to the question with which we confront ourselves tonight, or are confronted if you prefer, does God exist, is to me, yes, it does. It must do. It must do because it is so real to those who do believe in it. There are people of whom it may be said that for them, God does exist. I've become perfectly persuaded of this by now. There is
Interesting. So G-Man, what do you make of that? So he's saying right up front, the ontological question is, does something exist? Does God exist? And he's saying that because so many people do believe and they are so convinced that there must be something to it. That seems a rather honest disclosure.
Well, for starters, they have to say that because, no one's going to deny to us that, that we believe that God exists and we have our reasons for believing that he exists. But he's being sarcastic. That's what he's doing right now. He's being honest and sarcastic at the same time. So
okay,
it's a regular trait with a lot of these popular debaters. So let's hear more what he has to say, and everybody will see what
the other interesting thing is G-Man's actually watched this ahead of time, and I haven't. I want to be surprised. So he threw me here. Okay, so if I were sitting in the audience right now, I'd be like, ooh, interesting. Okay, so G-Man knows he's got the inside scoop. So let's go.
A form of persuasion that would make me assent to this proposition. Some of us are born, we're born too, in answer to Blaise Pascal's own problem, the one that made him write his pensées and address them to those who are so made that they cannot believe. Those of us to whom almost everything that Dr. Turek just said would be the mere equivalent of white noise. I suppose it's my job this evening to explain ontologically how that is the case. Perhaps I'll do it by force of example. Recently, very recently, in fact, as little ago in time as last year, the Vatican announced that limbo, the destination of the unbaptized child soul, no longer exists.
Could you mute it? I'm sorry, pause it a second. Yeah, Lubis said he doesn't see the sarcasm. I just want to let Lubis know while you're watching this, it is sarcasm. Primarily, this is a debate about whether or not God exists or not. Okay, and you got to try to remember that. Okay, if he's saying that he believes that I believe that a God exists in my mind or whatever, and he says he believes that, he's kind of giving up the debate because it only takes one person. It only takes one example for a person to say, okay, God exists in this sense, therefore he exists. You understand? Hitchens doesn't believe that God exists, and Hitchens believes that we don't believe that God exists. He's being sarcastic. So if you keep watching this, Lubis, you'll see what I'm talking about. But like I said, I had the opportunity to watch this first, so.
Yeah, so I want to point out something also with Hitchens here. Here's the deal. So if we look around the whole world and we look at the percentage of atheists in the world, we've got 93% of the world does believe in a God or gods, does believe there's a higher power, does believe in a spiritual force or some different form of what we would consider the Christian God. 93% of the people in the world believe that. Now, you've got also a pretty good portion of Christians. There's over 2 billion people in a 7+ billion planet who believe in Christianity. And you have only 3.1% of people in the United States consider themselves atheists, and another 4% or so consider themselves agnostic. But overall, in the entire world, we have basically about 7% of people who are atheists. And so there's a very small portion of people in Christopher's camp. Okay. And why is that? Why through the centuries have people felt that there must be something external? Well, I think a lot of it is in the general revelation from God. If you look at nature, I think that to me is clear-cut case of some planning. Look at the idea of a seed, like a sunflower seed. Who planned it? That little sunflower seed is going to bloom into this beautiful sunflower, or this little acorn is going to turn into an acorn tree, or any of that kind of stuff. God pre-planned all of that, just like he looked at the sperm and the egg, combined them, and it turned us into these amazing humans. I think looking at babies and offspring gives us great reason to believe that there is a higher power that put this all together.
Yeah, Frank Turek in the beginning of this debate, during his opening statement, mentioned in the very beginning of his opening statement, he said that in Christopher Hitchens' book, I think it's God's Not Great or something like that, he says that Hitchens mentions in his book that the world doesn't need God because of the microscope and because of the telescope. Because of the telescope and the microscope, the world doesn't need God to understand the world that we live in. You know, and I guess they come to the conclusion that if you don't need him to understand the natural world, then you can naturally follow through and say that God probably doesn't exist or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not really sure how you connect the dots on that. Yeah, it doesn't follow because let's say, hypothetically speaking, that we across the board believe that evolution was true. There's nothing wrong with the theory whatsoever, right? Let's say that we believe that the Big Bang was true across the board, right? And let's say we understood every nanonite on how the Earth came together and all of the processes on how it happened. That doesn't tell us that there wasn't a builder. You know what I mean? You can look at your house and you can get a construction person and they can tell you everything about how your house was built, from the foundation to the pipes to the beams and all those wonderful things to the finished project. Okay, they can tell you how it happened, but it doesn't mean that there wasn't builders. You know what I mean? They're gonna hear me repeat this later on as Hitchens goes on his statement or whatever. But science has not disproven God. Science has proven that God is a very sophisticated and a very specific God. That's all it's done.
Yeah, so just like if you understand how your iPhone works, it doesn't mean that the iPhone wasn't made by somebody. If you understand how your computer works, it doesn't mean that the computer doesn't have a source. If you understand how the painting was put together, it doesn't mean it didn't have a painter. Really basic stuff. And so just because we understand that there are 3.5 billion what they call well-ordered letters in DNA code, so they've identified the human genome in DNA code, and they realize that there must be a coder. If you saw well-organized, just a few words written on the beach, you'd think a mind is behind it. So in the DNA human genome, we think, yes, there's a coder behind the code. Really basic.
Exactly. And then people got to remember that when The Origin of Species was written, they didn't have no knowledge about DNA. So, as new information comes along, we begin to change the way we see things. So if DNA is all the things that S.J. Thomason just got finished talking about, and Frank Turek talked about it a little bit, and there are other wonderful minds out there that talked about DNA and how you have to have a coder or whatever. You know what I mean? If all of that information is true and all that information is new information, people shouldn't be so quick to say, okay, evolution can disprove that God exists. Because when we start getting into DNA, you're gonna have a real rough time showing how random mutations can create these new anatomical features. You know what I mean? And they don't like answering that question. They really don't. They try to make you sound like you don't know nothing about science, evolution, or anything like that. But the reality is they can't show us these new features that's coming from random mutations. I know I went on a bit of a tangent, and I apologize for that.
No, it's usually one of those cases where if you have modifications to chromosomes, for example, it usually ends up in an abnormality. Right? So if you have, the extra chromosome and you end up having Down syndrome or something like that. So when we've seen modifications to chromosomes, it's actually worked out to the detriment of somebody. And so we don't see where we're getting the benefits of that in such a way. So there's a lot of arguments that people should consider. Before we go, I want to say hi to the people in the audience. John Lloyd, hi. Karag, Nightwolf, Blaster Master, the Lubis. I think we have some atheists in here. So those, I think the last three. Actually, I'm not sure where Karag stands on this. Right off the
Lubis is an atheist.
We've also got Ilong Wormful. I think that's a new person here who says Hitchens was a brilliant writer. I think that might be an atheist. And we also have Jesse camping in the audience. So say hi to everybody. I am following the chat if you want to. And actually, Lecrae, I see some new people in here. Maybe they came over from your channel, G-Man. I see Lecrae Ziegler says G-Man should debate TJ Kirk again. Who's TJ Kirk?
That's the amazing atheist.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But let's get back to the actual thing with Christopher Hitchens.
Okay, here we go.
Hello, everybody.
So, hey, and I would host a debate with G-Man on my channel because G-Man said he'll debate people on my channel. So if any of you guys in the chat here at some point are brave enough to come up and debate G-Man, he knows his stuff, he knows his Bible. And so if you want to come on my channel, I'll make sure that it's nicely moderated and everybody gets a fair shot. And so, and uninterrupted conversation. So, sound good, G-Man?
Yep, absolutely.
All right, so here we go.
St. Augustine was in error, it appears, in sending so many children, at least the souls of so many unbaptized children, to this destination for so long. Among the comments that I heard about this, among the mildest, actually, was that of a woman raised in the Catholic faith whose child had died before baptism could take place, who had for many years believed that that's where her unbaptized child had gone. And she said, they can't tell me that place doesn't exist.
Okay, so the bottom line here is he's trying to make an argument that because people have flawed doctrines or flawed ideas about Christianity, therefore God doesn't exist. Does that make sense to you, G-Man?
It makes perfect sense.
Could be.
No, you're not strawmanning him, and it's perfect because he does it throughout his opening statement, and you're going to see what I'm talking about. But the argument of saying that, when a baby dies, that, that they're automatically going to go to hell or whatever, is wrong. If I had the time, I would. I don't buy that for a second. I know that there's something in the scripture that talks about the age of accountability. I talked about this during the Great Debate years, in which if a child died under the age of 7, under the age of accountability, more than likely they would they would end up in heaven. And then ultimately, God is the Alpha and the Omega. He knows what the child is going to be from the time that the child is born to the time that the child dies. So everything that God does will be just. He's not Satan. He's not the author of confusion.
Okay. Yeah, no, he's not. And I'm trying to figure out what the Lubis is saying here. No, I'm not, G-Man. I'm nothing. SJ was a Christian, not anymore, but I am a student of the faith. Okay, I think that means the Lubis is a Christian. I think that's what that means.
He says he's not an atheist and he's not a Christian. He's a student of the faith. He has a lot of questions. If you ever get him in a room, he'll just ask you a bunch of questions.
Okay. Yeah. And Master Blaster says, or Blaster Master, I always say his name wrong. I would debate G-Man on the beliefs that he wants a theocracy and openly supports the idea of deporting non-Christians. Do you really, G-Man? You want to deport non-Christians?
Let's continue with this.
G-Man has some very controversial views, apparently. Okay, so here we go.
It's been as real to me as anything possibly could be for so long. They've no right to tell me now that this no longer exists. Ontologically, limbo exists for those who believe in it just as God does. I'm not here to deny that. It's only a few decades now since the rival church, the Church of Rome, the Church of England, announced that really no one actually goes to hell. It could be that after you die you're forbidden God's grace, but there's no real place of eternal, unending, infinite torture and torment.
I don't think, how can the church actually know that? You know what I'm saying? Like we read the Bible says there's hell. Like how would the Church of England get up and say there's no hell? I mean, the Bible says there's hell. Jesus says there's hell. In the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, there's a hell, right? Yeah.
And believe it or not, it's not just the Church of England. It's the Hebrew Israelites, it's the Universalists. There's a bunch of groups out there that are denying the existence of hell. What he's actually doing now is he's trying to suggest, like what you talked about earlier, what he's trying to do, he's trying to say that this church believes this and this church believes that, who's right or whatever. You know what I mean? He's trying to talk about us like we have disagreements, therefore, God doesn't exist or whatever. But the interesting thing about this is that when atheists listen to this, at least the honest ones, they're going to go, but wait a minute. You have weak atheists, strong atheists, militant atheists, agnostic atheists, ichtheists. You have like all different types of flavors of atheism where they don't necessarily agree with each other. Some of them don't even agree on what the word atheist actually means. So if they're going to try to make the argument and say because there's confusion in the Christian church, therefore God isn't real or whatever, then I can make the argument and I can say, okay, fine. Since none of you agree on what atheism is, then guess what? Atheism isn't real. Like you can flip it right back on them to it. I know that's horrible logic, but sometimes I think saying it to them is beneficial to show them how they sound sometimes.
Yeah. I also want to say Hellbound Heathen, he's in the chat. He said hello in there. And so I just want to point that out really quickly. So thank you. All right. So you're right. It's this idea of trying to say that because, and I've heard this argument a lot. People are like, well, there's 3,000 different Christian sects. That must mean that that none of them are, either all of them are correct or none of them are correct. I'm like, no, where do you get that logic? They're, so anyway, so, okay, here we go. Just because, and it's kind of the logic of just because Johnny doesn't understand algebra means that algebra doesn't exist. You know what I'm saying? Does that make any sense? Yeah,
that's exactly what it sounds like. Exactly. or because there's math. I'm sorry. There's a addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. You know what I mean? And then you got what is it? You got algebra. You got trig. You got calculus. Therefore, math doesn't exist or whatever. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Come on.
Johnny only understands geometry. He doesn't get algebra. Therefore, there must not be math.
Exactly.
Totally ridiculous. Sorry if I sound like I'm strawmanning him. I really don't mean to strawman him. I'm trying to get a handle on what he's saying here. So let's listen here.
Oh, he'll get to it. He'll get to his offensive argument soon. They're coming. Trust me.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll listen for a sec. So serious, you guys prepare. If you're a Christian, prepare to be really offended. Here we go.
Who claimed the grace of God and the redemption of Jesus, made a living for so many years. And how do they make their living? By lying to children. Think of it. Hundreds and hundreds of years of people proudly earning their...
Okay, so what he's saying here is because there's some bad actors in Christianity, it means that therefore God isn't real. Is that what he's saying?
What he's going to do, he's slipping into the issue of the problem of evil. So just listen to what he's got to say, because he does it throughout this thing.
Lying to children and terrifying them, and saying that because they could do that, they were morally superior to us. Reason, common sense, decency, ordinary decency rebels against this kind of mind-forged
Wait, I have to say something because this is hilarious. Now, SD4, he said, hey, SJ, like you did with Holy Kool-Aid, did you ask Chris Hitchens if he wanted to participate on my video? Yeah, I did. Christopher, if you're out there, if you want to join in here.
Christopher! Yeah, you know what? I think we better go get our proton packs and go call the Ghostbusters, find Hitchens, and get him to come in here. Because I don't think he's going to make it.
Yeah, I don't want to. I mean, I'm not trying to disparage the deceased, but Christopher unfortunately would not be able to make it if he wanted to. So sorry, I picked someone who would not be able to make it. However, he's here in spirit, and we're listening.
Wait a minute. I hear him saying something. I don't go to tiny YouTube channels with delusional Christians. That's what he's saying, even from the great beyond.
Wait, I heard him say something too. You know what he just said?
What?
He said, there is a God.
Yeah, there is a God. Please repent.
He said, I'm kneeling to him right now.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right. Let's not do that no more because I don't want his. Oh, by the way, his brother's a Christian, right?
Yeah, I've read his book. His brother's got a book called The Rage Against God. He's called Peter Hitchens, if you guys are interested. And he was talking about Christopher when he wrote the book, The Rage Against God.
Yep. So let's continue.
Okay, here we go.
However charmingly or humorously it's expressed, but hell exists in the minds of several people I've spoken to just today on this campus in the intervals of other conversations. For them, it's real, and I don't say that it's not. But what I want to show is that it can, if it does exist, nonetheless be abolished, like many other mind-forged manacles and man-made tyrannies that confront us. And in fact,
stop.
This belief.
Yeah.
He just said for us it's real, and then he's going into since it's real, it must be abolished. This is not an argument against God's existence. This is an anti-theistic argument that he is making, that even if this place called hell does exist, we need to abolish it. So Frank's got to be sitting there and be thinking like, am I wasting my time Because even if I prove to him that God exists, he's saying that God's hell needs to be abolished, his heaven needs to be abolished, Christ needs to, forget about what he did on the cross and everything, if all of this is real. And right now, he's showing his really, 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 really anti-theistic side right now. So, and he gets into it. Like I said, when by the time he's done, might throw something at your computer screen.
Yeah, no, you're right. I want to say John Lloyd just put a super chat in here. He says, truth is based on, and thank you, John Lloyd. He said, truth is based on axioms and foundations. When people attack the foundations, the truth may appear to shatter. Some grab a small fragment and claim, I have the truth, like Mormons and JWs, he says. But I guess that's his idea. I think the idea is that Christopher's trying to shake up some of our foundations, although I don't think Christopher is shaking up what to you, G-Man, what would you say is the foundation, the most important belief in Christianity?
The resurrection.
Yeah, and he hasn't gone after that yet.
Yeah. Right now he's focusing on hell and parents talking to their children about this place called hell that we believe in, which he says he has no problem believing that we believe in these things. But now he's trying to say that if such a place exists, we need to abolish it. Those are not arguments for the non-existence of God. That is an anti-theistic argument he's making. Yeah. So technically, he hasn't even gotten into his counter argument to Frank Turek yet.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, so here we go.
Belief in a supreme and unalterable tyranny is the oldest enemy of our species, the oldest enemy of our intellectual freedom and our moral autonomy, and must be met, and must be challenged, and must be overthrown. I want to argue for nothing less than that. It's actually rather wonderful, isn't it, that religious authorities who used to say they were infallible say, just take the last pope, just the last. I know I'm not talking with the Catholic apologists this evening, but nonetheless, the church, when people say the church, they know which one they mean. They mean the one in Rome. The one where when Stephen Hawking was invited and was asked at the conference on the church and science, is there anything he'd like to see in Rome while he was there, he said he'd like to see the records of the trial of Galileo. Don't please be invoking Mr. Hawking, by the way, as if he was a deist.
Can you please mute this? Can you please mute this? Let me save a lot of people a lot of time about this argument from Roman Catholicism. And this is when I'm going to get myself in a little bit of trouble. Actually, they might disagree with me. I don't know. But all I know is this. If you're going to argue against Christianity, please, for the love of God, argue against Christianity. Roman Catholicism and Christianity are two different things. There are a lot of things that goes on in the Vatican that Jesus was going. He would go in there and do more than flip the money changers, the money tables or whatever. You do a lot more than that, because the Pope is not God's representative on the earth. We are not to be lying down prostrate to him. We are not to be worshiping him. We are not to refer to him as God. He is not the representation of the Holy Spirit. There's a lot more things I can say. A common thing that I see with atheists when they want to talk about our history is they constantly want to talk about the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church. In the movies, when they want to attack us, they attack the Catholic Church, the Catholic Church, the Catholic Church. When are they going to deal with the Protestants and deal with us? I mean, there's the Word of Faith movement. I can think of a whole bunch of things that you can say, but just rushing to the Catholic Church, that doesn't hurt nothing. It hurts Catholics, though.
Yeah, it's, as a person who was raised a Catholic, and so I can say that what I discovered after I left the Catholic Church is there are some flaws in the Catholic doctrines. And so there are some strengths. I mean, I like a lot of the things about the Catholic Church, but Catholics in a lot of cases are supposed to revere Mother Mary, but many of them seem like they worship Mother Mary. If you look at the proportion of the rosary of the amount of prayers that go to Mother Mary versus the amount of prayers that go to God, you say 10 Hail Marys, and then you say 1 Our Father, and then you say another 10 Hail Marys and 1 Our Father. Now that I've read what the Bible says, I actually realize that it should be, if either of those, it should be the opposite. It should be 10 Our Fathers and maybe a Hail Mary, but it's really, calling on her as our intercessor. The way that the Catholic Church does is they have a lot of people who are supposed to be intercessories between us and God, but instead Jesus told us to say this prayer to God. And so the other thing that the Catholic Church does, which is non-biblical, is they require that you go and confess your sins to a priest. And instead of confessing them to God, and then the priest tells you, go say 10 Hail Marys and an Our Father, and your sins are forgiven. That's God is the one who forgives the sin. So you're supposed to confess to him, if not the people you've sinned against. And the other thing that the Catholic Church does is in the Bible, it says we're not supposed to be picking these certain days where you require that people fast. And Catholics fast during Lent on Fridays. They don't eat meat, and a lot of that kind of stuff isn't necessarily, I mean, that was just created out of Catholic tradition. So tradition in Catholicism has led to a lot of different beliefs that actually don't align with what the Bible says. And that's why Martin Luther initially created his 95 reasons not to follow the Catholic faith. And that's where Protestantism emerged. People saying, wait a second, what does the Bible say about all this?
And what people need to understand about what it is that you're saying and that I'm saying is that you got to know the original. And okay, the more you are familiar with an original, the quicker you're going to be able to point out a counterfeit or something that is pretending to be something or something that looks like it, but it's not quite that thing. Like, for example, if you had a real dollar, you had a real $20 and you had a counterfeit $20 and you went to the store and you tried to spend the $20, you're going to get your goods. But if somebody has a trained eye and they notice that that $20 is not a real $20, you may not get it back. They may call the police and you may get locked up. Okay. Or if they do take the $20, the counterfeit $20, you might be able to get your goods, but the bank won't accept it. They won't be able to put it into their account and they'll suffer a loss. You got to know the difference between an original and a counterfeit or a copy. Well, not a copy, an original. You know what I mean? A counterfeit or whatever. So if you don't do that, then you're not going to understand why me and SJ has issues with the Holy Roman Catholic Church. And SJ just talked about some traditions in Mary. Like I said, we can spend the next 2 hours talking about the Pope and this so-called apostolic succession that happened. So. Yeah. And I got something special in store for people on GTV on this very topic, but not so much on the Catholic Church, but on what we're talking about with Mr. Hitchens and Catholic influence. But that's for another day. But and SJ, I don't think you want to miss that, SJ, because I know me and you've been chatting about that on the phone a little bit. So
yeah. Yeah, good. So. Yeah, it's always good. So that's all right. So so he and I, G-Man and I both agree on the. Some issues with the Catholic faith. I mean, so there are definitely some things that the Catholics are doing that don't align. I mean, they worship saints in a lot of cases. People walk around with different saints, patron saints of different sorts of things in chains on their necks, and that isn't something that's consistent with what the Bible says. We're really supposed to just worship Jesus and pray to God. And so
now what I'm not denying is this. Okay, I understand, because somebody in the live chat said, but Catholics believe in God and the Bible. Okay, until the day of judgment, I don't got an issue with their claim saying that they follow some things in the Bible and they follow some things with Christ. I don't have an issue with that. You know what I mean? I think on the day of judgment, something else is going to be found or whatever. But I don't have an issue with that. But that doesn't make you a Christian. A Christian is a born again follower of Jesus Christ, who is born according to the will of the Spirit and not according to the will of the flesh. Big difference between that and getting some water sprinkled on your head, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it does say, in fact, that's what convinced me when I was in a Baptist church. One of the very first services that I went to, the pastor was talking a lot about being born again and the value of being baptized when you say that you're ready to be baptized. And so I went and I got baptized. So I've been baptized twice. I was baptized as an infant and I was baptized as an adult. And so I figured, hedge my chances there, right?
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord.
Yep. And that's what I said. That's what you're supposed to say in the baptism. The very first thing you say is Jesus is Lord. And so
amen.
You believe
Yes.
From your soul. Okay,
yes.
So here we go.
All right.
Pope, just in the last decade of his tenure, apologized. He said, we were wrong about the Jewish question. We probably shouldn't have said for so long the Jews were responsible for the murder of Christ. We were probably wrong in forced conversion of the peoples of the Indies, as they were thought of.
Probably.
The Isthmus and the southern cone of our hemisphere. We were certainly wrong. We owe an apology to the Muslims for the atrocities of the Crusades. We owe an apology to the Eastern Orthodox churches for the incredible butchery to which they, our fellow Christians, were subjected by us, the Roman Catholic Church. And we probably owe an apology to the Protestants for saying so many awful things about them and torturing and burning and killing them too. So having now said we were completely wrong and completely cruel and completely sadistic and completely violent and retarded human civilization for that many centuries in that many countries.
Okay. I have to pipe in here because what he's saying is totally, just because the Pope admits that there were some wrongdoings in the past doesn't mean that God doesn't exist. I'm not getting his connection. But the other thing that he's pointing out is he's forgetting all of the Christian and Catholic scientists. In fact, Lemaitre, who understood the Big Bang in 1925, that was a Catholic who understood that and contributed to that. But there's also a lot of Christians over the centuries, scientists who have not retarded, what we know today. It's actually, they've contributed to what we know today in science. There are lots and lots of Christian scientists. And so
throughout church history, the Pope has said a lot of things, and it doesn't necessarily mean what the Pope said is correct. As far as the church being infallible, I don't know if he's referring to Roman Catholic history or is he referring to Protestant history? Because I don't recall anyone in the Protestant church ever saying that the church is infallible. We claim to be saved sinners. That's what we claim. So It sounds like, again, this argument is against the Roman Catholic Church. And I wish somebody would just sit, well, it's too late for Hitchens, but anybody else who believes this, to be able to sit them down and to explain to them, just because the Pope says something doesn't mean he represents everyone in the body of Christ. And I find that to be a very suspicious statement that he made there, because he's actually saying that the Pope is the head of all of Christendom. And I would think that a guy like Christopher Hitchens would be a little bit smarter than that, especially since he knows that much about history and he knows about the Protestant Reformation and what and the beliefs that we have. It's a very suspicious statement that he made there. Pope is not the head of the church.
Especially because, as he pointed out in the beginning, England hasn't separated itself from the church, and the Church of England is Protestant. So I mean, what in the world's going on here? Henry VIII, all that kind of stuff. I mean, look at their own history. There's a very significant Protestant population in England. And so, I mean, we had to speak to that. I want to say, Digital Hammurabi, he's in here. He says, what makes a religious text an original? Is it a matter of chronological order as far as original? I think that we have a lot of confidence in what we have, even from people like Bart Ehrman, who said that the core tenets of Christianity have been preserved in the New Testament. And so that, our main beliefs, Jesus rose from the dead, that's been preserved to the original. And so I think we're pretty good with that.
Yeah, and if anybody would just take the time out and let's say you read Acts chapter 2. Read Acts chapter 2 and listen to the gospel being preached by Peter. Okay, and then compare that gospel that Peter is preaching to all the other so-called gospels that's being preached in the world. And you're always going to find with the other gospels, work. You got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do this, you got to do that. Christianity is the only one that says that Christ already did all of that. All you got to do is trust and believe in him. And that's it, turn from your sins. So another thing that I wanted to point out, somebody in the live chat said at this particular point, we should be agreeing with Christopher Hitchens. Because again, the Pope said that the Jews had nothing to do with killing Jesus. Like, is that serious? If you actually go read the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you can see who actually had him crucified. It was the illegal trial that the Jews gave Jesus at night. It wasn't even supposed to be done like that. They brought him to the Romans, and then the Romans crucified him. Okay, so the Jews was responsible for that, and they will, and the non-repentant ones will be held responsible for that when they stand before God on the judgment day.
Yeah, and it's not, we also, just so that Jewish people don't think that this is anti-Jewish in any way, we also, of course, acknowledge the fact that the early Christians were Jewish people. Jesus was a Jew, and his disciples, Matthew, Mark, and John, all Jews. Okay, and so Peter was a Jew. I mean, all that we've got Jude and James also mentioned in the New Testament. They were Jewish, and so I think Luke is an exception, and one of the reasons why Marcion, who was anti-Jewish, went after Luke's gospel and ignored everybody else's because of the major Jewish influence. And so, yes, Jewish people, obviously, that's where Christianity came from. But of course, we have people like Caiaphas who wanted to take out Jesus, and so that's what happened. So exactly,
and like I said, our Lord and our Savior was from the tribe of Judah. He was an Israelite. He was a Jew. So, I don't support nobody attacking them because of what happened with Jesus. Something else that people need to understand if they actually read their Bibles is that this was God's will for Christ for Christ to give up his life. He wasn't murdered. You understand? Jesus had an illegal trial according to God's will. Okay, he was put in the hands of sinners according to God's will, and he was crucified according to God's will. Okay, the people who happened to give him the legal trial happened to be Jews at that particular time. You know what I mean? And the people who crucified him are Romans. So it's not we're not trying to be anti-Semitic. What we're doing is just stating history. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I also want to say the Lubis didn't hear what Christopher said about that. Christopher pointed out that the Pope says that he took back the fact that he says that he is sorry for the fact that a lot of Christians attributed the death of Jesus to Jewish people. He said that that was false, but actually it's quite clear in the New Testament in 4 different Gospels that the high priests were behind Jesus's crucifixion, and so
and more important than that,
and so that's something that's a falsity that's brought out there by the Pope.
And more important than that, he said that the Pope, that he was talking about how the church claims infallibility, that the church is infallible. So he used those examples to show that we were probably wrong, we were probably wrong, we were probably wrong. You know what I mean? And that's why we felt the need to dig into some of this. As far as the Crusades and what they did during the Inquisition and what they did to the Muslims, I think history speaks for itself on how people should view that.
So just so the Lubis can be happy and listen to a longer version of what Christopher says, let's go for a few minutes on Christopher and see if we can, and then we'll take it and we'll dissect it some more.
Okay, all right.
All right, here we go.
Continents, we're quit, and now we can go back to being infallible all over again. There are people who on faith will accept being spoken to in that tone of voice and in that way, but I, ladies and gentlemen, am not one of them. And I don't think there's any form of persuasion that should allow you to be spoken to as if you were serfs or slaves either. Proceeding with the ontology with which I began, the Aquinas point, that if you can conceive of something, whether it's a ghost, a phantasm, or a deity, if you can conceive of something, it is in some sense real if it's real in your mind. And showing with the obvious fallacy that has always attended that, is it nonetheless possible for an atheist to say, a proclaimed atheist to say, as I do, proclaim myself to be, that God positively can be said not to exist? No. It's a very common misunderstanding about my fraternity, sorority. I'll just take a moment to clear it up. The atheist says, no persuasive argument for the existence of God has ever been advanced or adduced without convincing rebuttal, that no argument in favor stands or has been found to stand the test of argument and evidence. We cannot say that we know that there could be no such entity. Among other things, we are too reverent of the extraordinary time of discovery, innovation, pushing back of the frontiers of knowledge and understanding that's taken place just in our own time to make any such remark. But by saying this, we say, I think, quite a lot. There is no valid or coherent or consistent argument that would not work, if it comes to that, for the existence of any God. Now, I noticed it was by a slight work of elision, a bit of tap dancing there, that Dr. Turek went from being a deist to a theist, and then from being a theist to a Christian. Now, I know he does not believe in the existence of the sun god Ra. I'm practically certain he doesn't believe in the existence of Zeus. If you'll pick up a copy of my Portable Atheist, a selection of the finest writings by non-believers, down the years, and just turn to the 3 pages where Mencken, H.L. Mencken, lists the easiest to name 3,000 gods that used to be worshipped and that no longer are held to exist by anybody.
Okay, we gotta pause this. We gotta pause this. Oh God, this is okay. Woo! Okay. First of all, let me just comment on what he just got finished saying. He was saying, "Oh, there's a whole plethora of gods that used to be worshipped that that people are no longer worshiping." Go look at paganism. They worship a plethora of gods. Now, they may have had different names in the past, but they have new names today, and they have the same attributes as the gods that they worship back then. So there are people that are worshiping pagan gods today with different names that did the same things that these gods in the past did. Okay, there was a god of fertility, a god of knowledge. There was the Nile River. People still worship that, by the way. They're called Kemets. You know what I mean? There are people that worship human beings, people that worship Thor and Zeus. You'd just be surprised. People worship these things. Okay. But the thing that I want to advise a person to do if you're going to argue with an atheist on whether or not God exists is make sure that you just don't talk about the God of the Bible. Make sure you bring them all of them. okay, to avoid what you're listening to right now, okay? Because let's say, hypothetically speaking, you're talking to an atheist and you say that this is my evidence, therefore God exists, right? Like actually, I like to use the clown cosmological argument. I'll use intelligent design. Somebody else will use the presuppositional argument or something like that. You know what I mean? And they'll say, okay, boom, that's proof that God exists. What the atheist will do to try to get out of trouble and to try to avoid the burden of proof is what they'll do is they'll take the very same arguments that you used and argue for the flying spaghetti monster, and argue for He-Man, and to argue for Superman. Those are theistic arguments. And what they'll say is then, you know, I can use that evidence to prove, this is what he's going to say, by the way, you can use that evidence to prove that any God exists. That's not an argument for atheism. That's an argument for theism. Okay? If you just argue specifically for the God of the Bible, then that argument can kind of be used against you, but still, it's still a bad argument because it's still proving that theism is true. In order for theism not to be true, he has to be able to give you a logical, sound, reasonable argument that would suggest that, you know, that materialism is all there is. That human beings and the things that you see around here is the only things that exist. You know what I mean? And actually, I'll give you a perfect example of some of the logic that they like to use. They'll say that God is invisible. Tell him to make himself known and we will, you know, and we will believe, right? SJ, right now, without the use of any equipment, can you see an atom right now?
No.
Can you see any molecules at the smallest level? We need a machine to be able to see these things, right? And if that's true, then if we need a machine to see these things and we get the machine, then we can say, boom, you know what I mean? We believe in atoms and we believe that these small molecules actually exist, right? Okay, fine. What if we didn't have that machine? What if we never owned a machine like that? If we hear somebody talking about it, we're taking it on faith, right? Now, what happens when we're talking about God, right? We don't have any machinery to be able to see behind time and space. But I do want to quote some famous atheists here on YouTube that just because science hasn't made a machine to be able to see behind time and space doesn't mean that God doesn't exist. You know what I mean? So again, you have to be careful when you're making these arguments with these atheists. They'll try to take your arguments, use it against you, and say, okay, that could mean that this God exists or this God. And I know you don't believe in them, therefore your God doesn't exist. It's a dumb argument. You know what I mean? And he's going to do it here, and it's going to make you cringe, SJ, when you hear it. Anything that you want to say?
It does make me cringe when people try to compare Zeus and Ra and all of these silly gods to Jesus Christ. Of all the faiths that are out in the world, the only one where a God has manifested himself in the flesh is Christianity. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of people, when they have these occult sort of issues, or they have these this communication with spirits and that sort of thing, the spirits, according to Hugh Ross, a lot of times are completely against Christianity. Why do they pick Christianity and they don't go after Zeus? They don't go after these other gods. They go after Christianity. It's because Christianity is the truth. And so, exactly. And we also have examples like right now over in the Muslim world, we've got a lot of Muslims saying they've had dreams of Jesus. We've got Jesus making appearances and doing things today to a lot of people. There's a lot of good reasons why people believe in Jesus. Zeus isn't making any appearances. No one's reporting that Ra is making appearances to anybody. So. And
you want to know what I personally believe? I believe that because I know Frank talked about this, and he talked about the whole cause and effect thing. I think he called it surge or something like that. I think he called it in the beginning of this. But he talked about the bang, and he talked about the singularity and it expanding. It was either something behind the singularity or the singularity, or what they call the singularity itself. Because what I'm going to start doing, Eshe, is I'm going to start saying that singularity was not a singularity, because they can't prove that. What they'll try to do is say it's a dead sun, and then it expanded, and it was the bang or whatever. I think that singularity was God. He said, let there be, and then it happened. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I'm going to go into detail about that on GTV to actually prove that. But that's what I think actually happened. And for Christopher Hitchens to say, well, then how do you know it couldn't have been Thor, or it couldn't have been Zeus, or it couldn't have been... Okay, let's say it was Zeus. Atheism is still wrong. You know what I mean? Yeah. Those are bad arguments, you know?
Yeah, and I have yet to see people make positive arguments for atheism, aside from looking at evil in the world and saying, because there's evil, there must not be a loving God. That's the main argument that I've seen. Although for them to be able to label something as evil means there must be something that they would consider good, and that would mean that there's also a moral compass going on here. And so where did that moral compass come from? So you wouldn't be able to label something either evil or good if you didn't have some sense of what something would be if it's evil or good. That means there's, again, we've got a sense of that coming within our conscience, which God has planted in us. And I want to say hi to
argument.
Craig Reed.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I would say hi, Craig Reed, in the chat here, and Eris 106, Craig. I see Jesse Camping and the Lubis. That's who I see right now in the chat.
All right, how you doing, Craig? I think their best argument is the problem of evil. Honestly, talking about God and what they think God has done in the Bible that would be considered horrendous, that's their best argumentation. But that doesn't lead you to atheism. It only leads you to anti-theism. It's not the same thing, because none of them has ever come up with a solid argument or a good reason to believe that God doesn't exist. You know what I mean? Because if you listen to their argumentation, it just sounds like denialism. You know what I mean? Yeah. Actually, I was in a room with this guy by the name of Alex Barton one time. And I told him, what if God presented himself before you? He came down from heaven, stopped being invincible, stood in front of you, and he held a dead star in his hand. Would you be convinced he was God? And what he said to me was, no, I wouldn't. And he said that he would question himself, that he's probably looking at an illusion or whatever, you know what I mean, that it's not real, and that he's living in the matrix. What does that tell you about a person who claims that they're looking for evidence for God? Yeah. You know what I mean?
I think that's where you get the honesty. If you ask an atheist, okay, if Jesus Christ appeared to you right in front of you in the flesh, what would you do? And a lot of them are like, well, I would have a lot of questions for him. What do you mean you have a lot of questions for him? You're a human. We're not at all on Jesus's level. I mean, come on. And so, or they say, I would walk away, or I'd punch him, this kind of answer. Or else they'd say, okay, I would believe in him. Now that's an honest answer. I would believe he existed. And they say, but I wouldn't worship him. I mean, those are the kind of answers I've gotten a lot when I put that question out on Twitter.
Yeah, I heard a lot of the same too.
Which is
so let's
sad.
go back to Mr. Hitchens. It's very sad.
Okay, and so Lubitz doesn't know what Hitchens is building a case right here. He's basically so far making the case that there's all kinds of other gods, and therefore, because other people believe in these other gods, therefore no gods must exist. So I don't think that that's a really credible case. If that's what I hope I'm not straw manning him, but I think that's what I'm hearing here.
He's on the problem of evil now. He's gonna start talking about it a little bit more in detail.
Okay, yeah, let's go.
Come out. No, he thinks he doesn't just know, Dr. Turek, that there is a God. He knows which one is the right one from a potentially infinite list, actually from a list that's as long as the number of people there are or have ever been in the human species. Because if you ever argue with a theist or a deist, as I do every day, you'll find they all believe in a God of their very own. Indeed, they often say a personal God. Indeed, they often say a personal savior. So out of what are we reifying a concept that applies to all of us? Out of nothing but
mute. That's actually incorrect. There's not that many religions out there that claim that they have a personal savior. I know Christianity is one of them. Come to think about it, is there another religion out there that teaches?
Well, let's first talk about
Superman, perhaps.
108 billion people have walked on the planet. Okay, so that's what the Population Reference Bureau says. 108 billion people. There are not 108 billion different gods or faiths out there. That's just absurd. And so we have a very significant portion of people on the planet who worship Christianity, but there's also a lot of people who are, say, Hindus or Buddhists or Muslims. The Hindus actually do, from my friend who's a Hindu, from what I found out, is he actually prays to certain Hindu gods. Like he feels that those gods are taking care and listening to his prayers. And so I do feel like I don't think they'd say savior, but I think that he does think that he has these gods and he thinks that they answer his prayers. And so that's from the Hindu faith. Now, Muslims also pray to Allah, but they believe that Allah does not answer prayers. Allah's going to wait until they appear before him, and then he's going to judge whether or not their works, their good works exceeded their bad works. And if the scales balance towards good works, they're going to earn his love. Okay, that's the Muslim faith. Right. And so that's not like the Christian faith. We're saying Jesus already did the work for us. Our good is not going to outweigh our bad necessarily. And it doesn't necessarily matter if we follow Jesus and we try to emulate him. and we have faith, our works will be an outpouring of that. And so we will end up being good and doing those kind of things, thankfully, because we're following Jesus and trying to live like he does.
And what he's doing is he's promoting this idea that because polytheism exists, therefore Christianity is wrong. You know what I mean? Like, how do you know which one's the right one? Satan is the one that created this polytheistic worldview. You know what I mean? To confuse people. He's the author of confusion. You know what I mean? So that's why you have Christian apologists, though. You know what I mean? That will hear another belief system, and then when that belief system attempts to attack Christianity, or when we want to confront another particular belief system, we can actually sit down and talk to them and show them why they're right or wrong about what it is that they're saying. And it's up to you, the atheist, to do your due diligence, to read a book or a library of books like the Bible, and figure out for yourself who's telling you the truth and who is lying. But until you actually do that, you're going to make hasty generalizations like Christopher Hitchens is doing right now. Like, I wish I could respond to him on stage. Oh my God, man.
Yeah, don't you? I mean, he was pretty famous in his few years of really promoting his atheism. So he became a pretty big name, and so he still has a bunch of people following his doctrines and his beliefs. They've been, I would say, indoctrinated by Christopher Hitchens. Is that possible, you think?
I think they've been very indoctrinated, and they bring these arguments into these hangouts thinking we never heard this stuff before, thinking they're going to deconvert us. And they're finding out that, wow, okay, so they're all familiar about Hitchens and his argumentation. Yeah, you'd be surprised. And it's not just him.
Okay, so Lubis really wants us to listen to more of Hitchens so he can understand Hitchens' argument here. So let's see if we'll listen to him and see if we can get it. But basically what we're seeing so far is that Hitchens is saying, because there's all of these people who've walked on this planet and all of these gods that people have believed in, and that it's Frank Turek has figured out which one of the gods is true, that Frank Turek must be wrong because other people don't agree with Frank Turek. Now that's just sort of silly. It's, again, if you look into the facts surrounding the resurrection, you look into the early disciples and the experience that they had, how they came out of hiding and started preaching despite being massively persecuted over decades. They refused to recant. They said they saw the risen Jesus. Well, I think the best explanation for that is they saw the risen Jesus. No atheist has come up with an alternative explanation that explains all the minimal facts.
Exactly.
So that's that. Okay, here we go.
Thinking and nonsense and fear and ignorance, and above all, and I'm not quitting on this point, servility.
I do want to, sorry, but the thing is, I see right here, one of his biggest problems with God is that God's in authority, and he doesn't want to accept the authority. He's referred to the word servility and also slavery, like he refuses to be a slave to God. Now we have in the Bible, we're all considered servants of Jesus. It's a better word would be servant, but yes, we are going to be servants of Jesus. That's part of the deal. He's the God, we're not. And so we have to accept that. We're not also a bunch of little mini gods who can put ourselves up on his level, which is what Christopher Hitchens is attempting to do.
And this is what I believe Satan convinced a third of the angels in heaven to believe, that we don't have to be subservient to God. You know what I mean? And obviously, if he convinced the angels, he's convincing a lot of people here on the earth of this same thing as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they don't want to. So, yeah, you're right. Gosh, it's pouring rain out here right now. It's awful. Ugh. Glad I'm not on my bike, though, right? Right, G-Man?
Yeah, thank God for that.
Called me when I was on my bike being poured on. It's getting soaked. The phone rings. I'm like, I'm getting soaked. So, okay, here we go.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone.
Whoops.
Hi, I'm Rex.
Commercial.
Oh boy.
In front of
Sorry,
BMW's self-driving.
In this room is an atheist. Everyone can name a God in which they do not believe. Let them advance the case that the one in which they believe is the superior one. Let Dr. Turek be the first person I've ever met to do that convincingly this evening, and I will show him due respect.
Okay, so he basically said that people believe in different gods, and if we can present a good case for Christianity, then he'll entertain that. Okay, he'll entertain the idea that Jesus is Lord. Okay, and so I think Frank Turek does present a really powerful case for Christianity, and I think that if anyone here wants to be honest and look into the facts surrounding the resurrection, I think you'll also accept that. Now, I've had atheists tell me, okay, I'm willing to grant. Here's what an atheist called Renee told me. I'm willing to grant the resurrection, but I won't accept that Jesus is Lord. And I'm like, you're granting that a man came back to life after 3 days and appeared to people over a 40-day period, but you're not willing to accept that this is obviously from the Lord, from God.
Well, actually, that makes sense. It makes sense. You want to know why? Because this person is acknowledging that Jesus was God. If he rose from the dead, that is precisely who he was, right? So if they're saying that they won't refer to him as Lord, or they won't worship him, that's not atheism. That's anti-theism. You understand? Meaning they hate God so much, or they disagree with him so much, or they find him so unpleasant that they're not willing to bow the knee. You know what I mean? So that's not atheism. And most of the people that identify as being atheists anyway, I really don't believe they're really that anyway. I think they would identify more as anti-theists or misotheists. That would be more accurate for what they really are.
Yeah, I think a lot of that, I would say the same thing. I think a lot of people, there's different reasons that people are theists or anti-theists and or atheists. I think that what we're seeing on social media is sort of a microcosm of the anti-theist group more than anything else. I think that if we were out there in the real world interacting with people with whom we work and go to school, and those sorts of people, they're not nearly as what do you call it, as actively against God as some of these people that we see online. Would you say that's fair?
I think that's very fair, and I think it's true. That's why a lot of them use YouTube, and they use social media to spread their beliefs or whatever. They don't have to interact with nobody. They don't got to worry about harm coming upon them, despite how disrespectful that they are, or anything like that. They can hide behind, this computer screen, and don't even show their face a lot of times, and spread what it is that they actually believe. So
and Hellbound Heathen is saying he doesn't think they hate God, they just don't have enough evidence to believe. Now, I think that's one of those things where people say, okay, God, show yourself to me. They put themselves in a superior position where suddenly they're putting God on their timeline, whereas God has his own timeline for when he makes himself obvious to us in a specific revelation. However, everyone, Hellbound Heathen, and I know you do believe in some stuff, but everybody does have a general revelation just by looking outside of nature and into the cosmos. We have a general revelation of God, even looking into our DNA. And so specific revelations in Jesus. So
and this needs to be said. One of the things that I noticed that when you talk to atheists as opposed to other religions is that they automatically say, I don't have enough evidence to believe. To believe what? The gospel or the existence of God? I want to make this perfectly clear, crystal clear to people that are watching this. You believing that God exists. Let's say today we convince you that God exists. Do you understand you're still in the same boat as if you was an atheist? Satan believes that God exists. Look at his destiny. The issue is do you believe that you're a sinner and that Jesus Christ died for your sins, that he atoned for your sins, and that if you put your faith in him, that you'll be saved? That is the issue. And that issue, you're going to come to that issue on faith. It's never going to become because this is what I have, therefore you believe, you know what I mean? And you can, it's not going to be that. It's going to be, you heard the gospel, you have sufficient reasons to believe the things that you've heard, and then you're going to believe. We're not talking about a blind faith. You know what I mean? SJ can talk to you all day long about why we believe that Jesus existed, the resurrection, church history, what really happened back in the day, what's going on today. And some of you are not going to be convinced because I ain't trying to be disrespectful, but I think that some people are just too lazy. They don't want to pick up their Bibles and actually read the claim and then compare it to a history book, to what actually happened in history. You'll see that all of these things happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Compare it to the history book and look at, even in history books, secular history books. I've got one in front of me called the Historical Atlas that acknowledged that, yes, Jesus Christ walked the earth by the year 313, when Constantine finally legalized Christianity and gave Christians legal protections. Between 5 and 6 million people were following Christianity. How is it possible that a person who's a fisherman, a carpenter, a couple of fishermen, and a tent maker could be so influential that 5 to 6 million people were risking their lives by worshiping him by the time this was finally legalized? Well, it's clear that some divine inspiration came into these people. But when Jesus had passed, when he was crucified, maybe there were about 120 people, but the church grew in leaps and bounds because it's the truth. and God inspired that. And so if it were a man-made faith, it would have died with Jesus, but it didn't.
Exactly. Amen and amen. Let's get back to the hitch slap.
Okay, here we go.
I don't think the task can actually be undertaken. Now, the same tap dancing hopes you will not notice that deism and theism are two quite different things. The deist argument says that there is so much order apparent in nature and in the cosmos and in the universe that it might be unwise to assume that such order has no one interested in ordering or designing it. That assumption might be an unsafe one. The philosopher Paley, in his natural theology, said design implies a designer. He came up with the very famous image of the watch. If you come across a watch, if you're a primitive tribes person in the Sahara, you may not know what it's for, but you know that it's not a rock or a vegetable. You know it has a purpose, and someone made it that way.
You know, his own argument, a rock or a vegetable. Does a vegetable have a purpose? Yes, it nourishes us. Do fruits, cherries, berries, bananas, do those have a purpose? Yes, they nourish the humans on this planet. So what on this planet does he see that serves no purpose? There's a lot of purposes that we see in nature that are there. You know, trees, that worked out really well for us. We're able to build houses. So there's just a lot of, I mean, really? He's just making an argument that I see as a good argument for theism. What do you think?
And that's what he's doing. He's inadvertently making arguments for theism. That's what he's doing. And by the way, to the tree argument that you made, and not only do they make good houses, they also are. We need trees to breathe. You know what I mean? When we breathe, when we inhale,
dioxide.
You know what I mean? Yep. We exhale carbon dioxide, and then the trees take it in. You know what I mean? And then they produce oxygen. So
yeah. Well, that's another argument that I've heard from atheists. They say, well, geez, I looked at the size of the universe. So they estimate the size of the universe. They're like, oh, there's so much wasted space. Well, you don't know that. You don't know if God has an intention for this space in the universe. And one of the things that I've heard also is if you look at our galaxy and you look at the way that Jupiter is so large, Jupiter is actually a magnet for a lot of asteroids and meteorites, and has protected the Earth from being belted with a lot of that. The moon is perfectly positioned and it's in a perfect size to help with our tides and other things. So there's all this stuff that's out there that's perfectly been situated here. And even these astronomers have pointed out, it's like somebody's been tinkering with the universe and that we're so finely tuned.
Exactly. So let's go to the man with the hitch slap.
Here comes a hitch slap.
Until quite recently, that was the default position of most intelligent people, including Mr. Jefferson, who, despite his intermittent atheism...
He's saying the default position is deism. Do you buy that?
No.
No, I don't either. Now, deism is this idea that God created the whole universe, and then he sort of tucked out, decided he wants nothing to do with it.
They worship this being that started everything and then left everything to itself. If that ain't the definition of a deadbeat, I don't know what the heck.
Oh my gosh, I was going to say that, a deadbeat dad. It's a deadbeat dad right there. Started the universe and took off.
I said that to
deadbeat dad philosophy. I'm going to call that. That's a great one, G-Man. The deist deadbeat dad philosophy.
I said that to a deist one time, and they nearly lost it.
Yeah.
But yeah, these deism is like Veckel calls it this. Deism is like diet atheism. That's what it is. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, I'm going to acknowledge that God exists. It's just not the Christian God, and we don't have any interaction with this God. I'm just acknowledging the fact that a mind has something to do with the universe and with human beings. You know what I mean? That's what usually happens to them before they finally admit that Jesus is Lord. So if you can get an atheist to become an agnostic and then become a deist, you did something.
Yeah,
you know?
I think actually, well, that's what happened to Antony Flew. So he's one of the world's most famous atheists, and towards the end of his life, he became a deist. So that's
yeah.
Okay, so here we go.
Judgment was a theist. I'm so sorry, was a deist. He would debate with, among the many skills he had, was a very advanced level of paleontology. He would debate with the greatest paleontologist of his time, the Count de Buffon. How comes it? How can it be that we find seashells so high on the mountains of Virginia? How can this be? Not even the most intelligent people of that day, and it's very recent, it's an instant in historical time, had any idea how that could be. There isn't anyone in this room who wasn't educated and brought up knowing exactly how that is. It's just a shame that Jefferson and many other intelligent and humane and well-educated literate people just couldn't see that far. He wasn't to know, though Darwin was born in his day, on the same day, actually in 1809 as Abraham Lincoln, the very same day, the two great emancipators, Darwin being, in my judgment, the greater of the two. Now we know this proposition to be true, the proposition that was ridiculed so pathetically, I have to say, I thought, by Dr. Turek. There is no explanation for the origins of our species, for the origins of our cosmos, for the origins of our globe itself. There is not one explanation left which requires the existence of a deus ex machina.
Okay, let's make it really clear. Darwin did not answer the question of the origins of the species. His book's called The Origins of the Species, but he actually spoke of changes in the species. He talked about mutations and changes after the species had been formed. Okay, and so he's not talking about where that all came from. So you have people like Richard Dawkins saying, okay, well, we don't know how, the first replicating cells came about. We don't know that kind of stuff. Therefore, they must have come about from another planet that had life. And so he's saying, there's this idea of panspermia, which is basically saying that the life that started here on the Earth came from maybe a meteorite that hit from another planet. Now, come on.
It's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. But let's listen to some more of this.
Okay.
He basically made the statement that we talked about earlier, where he said that, there couldn't possibly be any other explanations on how we got here and everything. He's going to bring up evolution and all that stuff. Like I said, we already debunked that.
Yeah, and Turek obviously probably said, God explains our origins, our meaning, our morality, and our destiny. And our purpose. We got a lot of great explanations from God. It's just that if people don't want to worship God, hence this guy right here, God lets them walk away, and he actually also sends a blinding delusional over them. So he actually thinks he's legitimately justified in his non-belief in God because he's been, his heart has been hardened, right?
Exactly. And one of the things that you'll notice about many of these atheists, very few of them, especially these new atheists today, will fall back on history. It's usually they're falling back on science. And, you just got finished talking about how God can explain why we're here, what our purpose is, morality and all this other stuff and whatnot, right? But science can't explain all that. And my God, have they tried to use it to try to explain to us how science has proved all of this? Like, for example, we learned our morality from the animal kingdom, right? Every single time a black widow mates with a male, the black widow eats the male afterward. If one of us did that today, we'll be locked up for the rest of our lives. So we don't learn our morality. And then on top of that, these animals eat each other alive. They don't kill you first and then eat you. They eat you while you're alive. And they do a whole bunch of things that human beings, if we ever did these things, that we would be locked up and have the key thrown away. So we don't learn our morality from animals. This social evolution that they're talking about, or this how we become moral over time, is nonsense. We have a moral lawgiver, and because we have a moral lawgiver, we have moral absolutes, where you will absolutely say this is right and this is wrong. Atheists will say that's not true. They'll say that morality is subjective. And if morality was truly subjective, then we would never call another person a horrible person. You know what I mean? And we can bring up scholar fiction and all of that, but I don't think we don't need to.
Yeah, well, I want to say, here's a couple things just to say as far as social evolution. Sure, we have learned certain things through our history, as far as we learn lessons in life, we learn lessons from what we've seen in history in the past as humans. But like you're saying, people don't forcibly copulate with other people without being arrested, like you said. Animals like to go steal food from each other. They forcibly copulate. They kill each other. They do all that kind of stuff that we consider immoral. Now, where do we get this moral sense from? And what is immorality in the animal world? Now, it's not, we have a moral conscience that tells us what's right and wrong, and it comes directly from God. And as far as I see, actually, somebody made a comment here. Where is that? Blaster Master says, SG accepts evolution. And here she just sits by and lets G go on about nonsense. Now, it's not that we both don't agree. I mean, here's the deal, accepts evolution. There are a lot of questions with evolution that haven't been explained. We're still missing a lot of transitory fossils. We still can't really explain exactly how things occurred during the Cambrian explosion. We still don't have our origins explained by evolution. And we still don't have any records right now where we're noticing one species evolving into another species. I mean, we don't see that right now. People are saying, so there's a lot of questions. I don't say that I accept evolution. I say I'm still looking at the data and what the data's shown us. And I also listen to people like David Berlinski, who has a lot of questions about evolution, as do some other people. So it's not that I don't accept it or not accept it. I'm out there looking for the information to educate myself. If God used evolution, then more power to him. I mean, if he made it work so we've evolved from single cell amoebas, that shows that God has a tremendous power.
You want to know something funny? When me and you went to school, can I say me and you? Yeah. When we went to school, we probably was taught evolution. Isn't it funny in our adulthood, we didn't even give it a thought? You know what I mean? Like it didn't stick that we're all animals, you know what I mean? And that, our closest relative is the chimpanzee and all this other stuff and whatnot. When you become a Christian, and I want the atheists to understand something here, and you get born again, everything about you that was old literally goes away. That thinking goes away. That's foolishness compared to what God is going to replace that information with. That you are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God, that you have a purpose. You know what I mean? There's no need to be depressed every day. You can get on your knees, you can pray and ask God to remind you why you're here and the things that you're supposed to be doing and what he did for you. You know what I mean? Evolution teaches you that through a very small, gradual process over a long period of time, that you started off as blue-green algae on a rock, because that's exactly what you guys believe, and then you slowly made changes over a long period of time. You know what I mean? If you want to believe that, that's fine. You're never going to be able to prove that, though.
Yeah, and I do believe that there are certain adaptations that species have grown with. Like, for example, the adaptations of gills to water for fish, or the adaptations of wings for birds that fly. I mean, there's different things like that. Actually, if you look at the King James Version of the Bible and you read Genesis, there's a verse that talks about a fish basically coming out of water and having wings. And so it's the idea that there could be some sort of evolutionary process between certain species. I do believe that some of that's possible, for sure. I do believe that there's a potential that there could have been a change in a sea-bound organism to be able to adapt to being on the earth and to the air. I think that's possible. But I'm looking at humans as exceptionalism, and I do believe that God formed humans to be exceptional, and in the way that's portrayed in the Bible. And so I believe that
what you're talking about is called microevolution, and that's small changes within a particular kind, like a bird, a wing might change its shape or color, or being big versus short or whatever. Everybody knows that's science, because you can actually see that. You know what I mean, happening. What we don't see is when they say that we share a common ancestor with grass or with an apple or with an orangutan or whatever. Those are the kind of things that we don't see. I believe that we have a common designer that used the same stuff to make us. And I know a lot of evolutionists don't believe that. Some theistic evolutionists do, but not the ones that don't have God in their worldview.
Yeah, the big question for people who are a really big question for people right here in talking about evolution and those kind of questions is the consciousness. Because just like you mentioned non-conscious beings like a rock, or a flower or a banana. Mm-hmm. You've got non-conscious existence. How did consciousness come about? That's the big question. That's the $1 million question that a lot of scientists can't answer. They haven't figured it out. And another thing that is really interesting to think about is what they call the double slit experiment. When they realized that these molecules do different things when they're being observed by a mind than when no observer was in the room. These little molecules, as if they can kind of sense the presence of an observer. That gives us this idea that consciousness matters, and also could speak to this idea that there was a consciousness that guided the universe in its processes. And so there was a mind before matter. We believe that, right? Mind comes before matter, and that's God's mind before our matter.
Exactly. So let's get back to the hitch slap.
Okay, here we go. All right, so here we go.
In every case, we have a better or sufficient explanation. I think that assertion of mine will stand any challenge this evening. I'm looking forward to hearing some more of them. Of course, Darwin used creationist images. He actually set out to vindicate Paley's theology, thought he could do it by his study, taxonomical study of nature. Einstein used God images when he spoke of the extraordinary majesty of the cosmos. It's in us. It's in our vocabulary. It's hardwired in us, you might almost say, to use images of awe-inspiring, godly, Mozartian, you might say, or even Shakespearean images when talking about these things. But when we come down to the actual analysis of them, we find that we don't need the prime mover at all, and that most of the prime mover explanations, if not all of them, have been positively misleading, so that the deist may propose a designer, and I may not be able to show you convincingly that there could be no such person, but the theist has all their work still ahead of them. From this designer, how do we get to the designer who answers prayers? Did you hear a thing? I mean, just a phrase, even an implication, even a suggestion from anything my opponent said, that you could, by an argument from design, prove answered prayers? Or prove that someone born of a virgin was therefore the son of God?
This, for the Christians that are watching this is why evidentialism, when you argue with an atheist, why a lot of people are jumping to the presuppositional argument. Because if you allow these debaters to constantly make everything about evidence, and I mean everything about evidence, you're going to be arguing with them forever. You're eventually going to convince them that a deity exists, and then they're going to say they don't want to worship him. We're told in 1 Corinthians that by the foolishness of preaching, people are going to be saved. When Peter got out there and he preached on the day of Pentecost, it was because he preached, okay? And the people heard and they believed. We are allowing atheists to take away the command that we were given by the Apostle Paul, that is by preaching. When we get away from preaching and it's time to start proving, then you can do this literally for eternity. Just go back and forth saying, where's your proof, where's your proof, where's your proof, where's your proof? Yeah. If a person doesn't want to believe, they're just going to just deny everything that you put in front of them.
Yeah, no, you know what's really interesting though is he mentions Darwin. Now, Darwin pointed out that if, just by our thumbs, the human's thumb, that we have a pretty good reason to believe in God, looking at the thumb and, the opposable thumb. And so he said that was a good reason. Darwin said that. Darwin believed in God. Einstein actually had this cosmological constant fudge that he put in these equations of relativity. He actually was denying this potential for the Big Bang until he went to the Hubble telescope and took a look at the evidence that was out there. And one of the reasons he did is because, according to Robert Jastrow, I think it was Robert Jastrow, said that he didn't like the theological implications of having a start date for the universe. And so you've got people actually fudging with the science because they don't want to admit that there's a start date. And in the Bible, it says, in the beginning. Okay, that's one of the significant things about the Bible that differentiates it from Hinduism and Buddhism. They don't believe in the beginning. They believe in the recycling. They think that the universe is just recycles over this eternal amount of time. We say the universe had a start date. And so that's why in 1925, we were vindicated. A lot of atheists prior to that time were trying to argue for a permanent universe, an eternal universe. And they were shocked to find out that, no, actually the science is showing us there was a start date.
Exactly. And then the laws of nature, like when did they come into play? If everything happened through random, like by random chance, or just happened because, there was enough heat in this singularity, of matter and what is it, hydrogen, and then it just expanded. When did the laws of nature take place? Because there are certain laws that have to be followed. You know what I mean? And they don't like it when you start asking them these questions, because if there are laws of nature, if there's a moral law that everyone has to follow, if there's laws about anything, then it has to be a lawgiver. There has to be someone who put all these things into motion. And a lot of them will not even acknowledge that because of the implications of an argument like that. That's why a lot of presuppositionalists will argue, okay, when did the laws of nature take place? You know what I mean? Can you demonstrate when these laws were put into action? How do you know that there wasn't an intelligence involved?
Yeah, well, it's even going to another point. I think to some of your point here in this idea that even if they found evidence, they don't want to admit it. I've got two sisters-in-law who are agnostic. One was raised a Catholic, the other one was raised a Christian. I'm not sure what the second one's original Christian sect was, but I know it's not Catholicism. But so they're both raised Christians, and they both decided that they both told me, like they both told me in different times that they don't really want to believe in God. They don't want there to be a God. I'm like, why? What are you doing? Both of them are really good people. They live moral lives. They're decent people. I don't get why they don't want there to be a God, but they both told me that.
Do they identify as atheists?
No, they're agnostic. They call themselves agnostic.
People that got that attitude will do anything to prevent God from interfering in their life, from saying that he doesn't exist to saying he's an immoral monster. You'll notice that they'll constantly go back and forth with that. They'll say that, okay, these are the reasons why I don't believe he exists. And when that doesn't work, they'll get on him all day about the things that he does in the Bible and how they disagree with those things, and how they'll say they'll never worship him in order to get you to stop preaching to them. You know, so the Christopher Hitchens' arguments are not anti-theistic. No, that's a bad way to say it. His arguments are not atheistic. I'll put it that way.
Pro-atheism. Yeah, it's not pro-atheism.
Right.
It's more anti-theism. It's anti-theism.
Yes. It's I hate God and this is how I feel. That's what he's doing right now.
I don't want to be a servant of God, and therefore I'm going to go out and pretend he doesn't exist. That's it.
And I would go so far to say that he's appealing to emotion. You know what I mean? And he's trying to get people to be emotionally led on what he's actually saying. I don't think he's really trying, although it looks like it, I don't think he's really trying to get people to think about anything. He just wants them to just, wow, this guy's a monster. He's evil. You know what I mean? Why would I want to worship him? But that's not atheism. That's anti-theism. You know what I mean? And if an atheist says that they can use anti-theism to bring someone to atheism, you know what I mean? What does it say about their atheism at the end of the day? They're using, they're twisting science, they're twisting logic. They have poor reasons, you know what I mean, to walk around here claiming that they're atheists. And that's why I believe that God has so many of us out there right now arguing with them and showing them, look, you have bad logic, you got bad reason, and these are not atheistic arguments. You're making arguments for the existence of God. You may not like them, but you're making arguments for him. And you know what I might do, Esha? You know how I got scholar fiction on the whole subjective argument? When I said my subjective, objective opinion, and I used them as the examples, I might start using Hitchens' arguments against God to prove that he exists, just to show them how silly they sound. I'm really thinking about doing that.
Yeah, I mean, well, I just want to say just something I was just thinking about. A lot of times people, they want to wait, I forgot my main point here. I'm going to have to come back to that, but I was just thinking about when you were, no, you were talking and I was thinking about, I mean, we have, I'm free. I'll come back to it. Let's listen for a second and then I'll come back to it.
All right.
Or could prove that resurrections occur and that by people being tortured to death thousands of years ago.
Sorry, I just remembered. Okay, what I was going to say is a lot of the atheists want to talk about God and they want to go to the Old Testament and they want to pull out what was descriptive in the Old Testament. The Old Testament is descriptive. The New Testament is prescriptive. The Old Testament tells us what happened in ancient times, the good, bad, and the ugly. The New Testament shows us Jesus Christ, and he gave us the prescriptions in the New Covenant. However, I notice the atheists will never go after Jesus and talk about Jesus as a moral monster. At least I haven't heard that very much. I hear the new atheists and people like Christopher Hitchens, they go after God the Father in the Old Testament. They don't like the way that God chose Israel. Israel was the chosen group. They think that that's, in fact, I just listened to David Smalley. I'm going to go talk on his channel again pretty soon. But David Smalley said something very similar to that on Dry Apologist channel. He said, oh, well, I don't agree that with some of the things that happened in the Old Testament that God decided, and why did he choose those people and he didn't choose other people? Why isn't God an equal opportunity chooser? It's because God chose the Jewish people to pave the pathway for Jesus. He distinguished them. He treated them, he gave them a set of rules that were much stronger, that they had to follow, that other pagans and other people in those ancient times did not have. And it's you know, God has sovereignty. He's the one who created all of us. So if he wants to choose a certain group to bring his son about, that's what he does.
Exactly.
So that was my bottom line. Okay, so here, let's listen.
We are now redeemed, that we are vicariously forgiven our own offenses by human sacrifice. How does deism help you to that? It doesn't. It quite simply doesn't and cannot. And the attempt to build from one to the other is a conjuring trick of a very vulgar, I think, kind. We live in the childhood of our species, so when Stephen Hawking says that if we could understand the event horizon that surrounds the black hole, we would, in some sense, know the mind of God, he proves that our vocabulary is still that of our infancy. He makes no concession to the idea of a theist or theocratic dispensation. I'd better ask now how I'm doing for time.
Okay, so I want to say, Blaster Master says, do I believe in the Trinity? Can we attribute the stuff that happened in the Old Testament to Jesus? Well, actually, what I do believe that you're going to be surprised about, and I don't know if everybody will be surprised about this, but I believe that Jesus appeared in the Old Testament. A lot of the times when they say the angel of the Lord appeared, and they give the angel of the Lord the ability to do things that only the Lord would do, I think those are Jesus making appearances in the Old Testament. That might be kind
amen
of
and amen.
radical. Yeah.
Well,
so
a lot of us believe that, actually. Like, for example, Melchizedek. A lot of us believe that, when Melchizedek showed up in the Old Testament, that was actually Jesus under a different name, because the Bible describes Melchizedek as not having a beginning or an end. So.
Yeah, right. And I don't know. One of the things with him is he, a lot of the characteristics of Melchizedek were completely in alignment with the sorts of things that Jesus did with the bread and the wine and those sorts of things too.
Exactly.
You're going to see a lot of references to the bread and the wine in the Old Testament that correspond to the New Testament in some of the imagery that was used in the Old Testament. Also, if you look at Exodus and you look at the story of Exodus and how they came out of the wilderness after 40 years, you're going to see that Jesus went into the wilderness for 40 days to be tempted by the devil. And so we also saw that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, here we go.
Good. Not sure I'm going to need all that. But I'd like to try and reply and fight on my feet when I can. And I made some notes about what Dr. Turek had said, and I feel that they were challenges to me that I would be ignoble if I didn't respond to. The first, and I thought frankly, the most egregious, was this. I find it extraordinary that it can be said on a university campus in this year of grace that without God, humans are capable of doing anything. That there is no moral restraint upon us if we don't concur in the idea that we are the property and creation of a supreme being. I'm making the assumption that all of you check in every now and then.
Hey, I want to say, G-Man, you do got a little bit of background noise there. I'm just pointing that out real quick. But as far as the moral idea, what's really interesting is his own brother. In his book, Rage Against God, one of the very first things that Peter said was Peter was raised a Christian, so was Christopher, and they both left Christianity for atheism. And Peter, his very first thing he said was he realized he had no constraints. He could do whatever he wanted. And he said that he did do whatever he wanted over a period of years, and he really wants to apologize to all the people he hurt over that period of years. And so there we have it, right, G-Man?
Yeah, exactly. Actually, I got to go answer the door real quick, so I'm just going to bow out for a moment. But I know what he's going to say. When I come back, I'm going to respond.
Okay, good. Excellent.
All right.
So here we go.
All right.
With some kind of news outlet and have a view of what's going on in the rest of the world, isn't it as plain as could be that those who commit the most callous, the most cruel, the most brutal, the most indiscriminate atrocities of all do so precisely because they believe they have divine permission?
Okay, so yes, we do have people who've committed atrocities. However, I'd like to point out the biggest atrocities of the last century were under Stalin, Pol Pot, and Mao Zedong, the leaders of USSR, Cambodia, and China. 120 million people perished under those communist regimes. Well, guess what? They weren't doing it because they believed in God. They were doing it because they didn't believe in God. These were atheistic regimes, okay? And so the biggest atrocities that have ever occurred in the world were under these communist regimes run by atheist leaders who did not say that they had God guiding them, okay? So just so you know, really important to point that out. Now, I'm not sure what example he's going to use, but let's go.
Shall I answer my own question? Should I insult you by adding more? Who can't think of an example of this kind? Let me put the question in another form that I've put in now. Every forum from YouTube to C-SPAN, to the wireless, to the print, to the radio, to the television, and innumerable forums to those who say that without God there can be no morality. You are to ask yourself two questions. You are to name a moral action undertaken, or a moral and ethical statement made by a believer. I dare say you can do it. You are then to say that you can not imagine a non-believer making this moral statement or undertaking this moral action. Can you think? Can you now think? Can any of you think? You don't have to answer now. You have all night, and you have my email. And I've done this with everyone from the Archbishop of Canterbury to even lower people. You name me the ethical and moral actional statement that a believer can make and an unbeliever cannot, and there's a prize. And I'll tell you about that later. Now there's a second question. Think of something wicked that only a believer would be likely to do, or something wicked that only a believer would be likely to say. You've already thought of it.
Everybody's
a straw man.
Yeah, I was going to say everybody can sin. Everybody can do really evil things. You could have believers or non-believers alike. However, the difference is Stalin, Pol Pot, and Mao Zedong didn't think they'd be held accountable. Okay, they were busy slaughtering people for the greater good. Look at the Gulag Archipelago. If you want to see what Stalin was enabling, Stalin basically took all of the food from the farmers, even so much food that they couldn't afford to feed their families. They took any goods from the farmers and gave it to the greater collective in the city. They starved to death. Anyone who complained about communism was shipped off to Siberia. They paid relatives and neighbors to snitch on people for their anti-communist views in Stalinist Russia, and many of those people starved to death. That is complete evil, and that was done by a man whose daughter said in the very final moments of his life, he shook his fist at God. He believed. He just was mad at God. And he was, of course, mad at God because he was also, and then one thing that actually Blaster Master has incorrect, look at the Library of Converse, Blaster Master. We have a very significant detailing of all of the churches that Stalin had taken down and all of the people that he slaughtered, okay, because they were believers in the church. There was a significant effort to go against the churches, and you'll see that right from our Library of Congress. It's in full detail.
Yeah, let me say a couple of things about this too, for those of you who are not aware of this, because I know a lot of you that are watching this are used to being entertained and not taught. So let me, and by the way, I'm saying that SJ because I know who's watching this program right now. SJ is on point with how many lives atheists have taken under Stalin, under his communist Russia. I talk about this a lot on GTV and on my main channel, the G-Man channel. There are videos on YouTube that you can watch where the old Soviet Union destroyed churches, stole their property, and I believe they gave it to the state, if I'm not mistaken. And they was responsible for the deaths of over 25 million people during that particular time. All right? It's serious. And they wasn't just killing theists. They were killing their own as well, too. You know what I mean? And it was a coordinated plan that they had to push this type of thing. Now, you can sit there and say I'm lying all you want. Go type in on your YouTube search engine. Joseph Stalin destroys churches in Russia, and you'll see, and you'll see what we're talking about. You know what I mean? Now, I do want to point out the straw man that Christopher Hitchens built here. He said that without God, you cannot have morality. That is not the argument that we Christians make. The argument that the argument that we make is that without God, you can't make sense out of what is good and what is evil. You know what I mean? You can't do. First of all, you can't do any good in the eyes of God if you don't even believe that he exists, or if he ain't real or whatever. But as an atheist, nothing's right and nothing is wrong. According to their worldview, we all evolved from a common ancestor that goes as far back as blue-green algae on a rock during the abiogenesis days, right? How the heck do you determine what is right and wrong with that process? You know what I mean? How does an atheist come and say, SJ, you are wrong for sleeping with another man while you're married? An atheist can't do that, especially if they're telling you, SJ, that morality is subjective and it is all based on your own personal opinion. You know what I mean? So Hitchens isn't arguing it right.
Yeah, no, he's not. I want to say it's as far as sees at which churches, it's the Russian Orthodox churches. You can look into it. In fact, I will link a blog I've written on it. I actually captured what the U.S. government said and then put it in a blog on the Russian churches and what was going on. So yeah, and the other thing that just to speak of, nobody's saying that atheists don't have morality. In fact, God gave them the morality they have. The reason atheists have consciences, just as the rest of us do, is because God gave us a conscience, as explained in Romans 2:15. So we all have consciences. We all have a sense of morality. Even if you want to deny that God did that and God exists, you still have that conscience to live by, and it still bugs you, doesn't it? It bugs everybody that when you do something wrong, our conscience speaks to us, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, okay. So here we go.
The suicide bombing community is entirely religious. The genital
I hate when they have to try to equate us with Muslims in the Muslim extremist group. You know what I'm saying? If you go back 50 years, Muslims weren't doing the suicide bombing and stuff that we're seeing today. Unfortunately, we are seeing that today. But this is a relatively new phenomenon going on with the Muslim extremist crowd. Not all Muslims at all, just the extremist fringe group within the Muslim faith. And I hate when people try to say, okay, because they have suicide bombers, this must be a theist thing.
Well, okay. Did he bring up yet about how in the name of religion that all of these atrocities has been done in the name? He brought that up, huh? Well, again, going back talking about Joseph Stalin, and that's the part I really was waiting for him to get to. Let's try to remember here, ladies and gents, that was an atheistic communist nation that did that, and their dictator was an atheist. Okay, let's try to remember in North Korea that their leader over there is an atheist, and he's pointing nuclear weapons at the United States and other countries. And if that ain't enough, ladies and gents, these school shootings that are going on here in the United States are atheists doing that. People are going into these churches and shooting people. Those are atheists. Okay, and if they understood what was right and wrong, why are they walking in these churches and shooting the people that are in these churches? If they understood right and wrong, why are they threatening to blow up schools and going into schools and shooting people in these schools? Okay? You can't sit there and make the blanket statement. Oh, I'm sorry. And there's one more thing I want to say. Not to mention that there are more religious people in the world than there are atheists. So him making that statement doesn't really mean a lot. That's important to point out. Okay? But for him to make a statement like that and ignore their history is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
Look at the Holocaust. Go look at what happened.
Just look at USSR, China, and Cambodia. I mean, that's enough. 120 million people. I mean, people like to bring up the Crusades. One of the reasons for the Crusades was people in those days were fighting back against the Muslim advancement. And the Muslims who had been taking away a lot of the land of the Christians, they were fighting back the Crusades. So the Crusades weren't necessary. I mean, some of the stuff that came out of the Crusades was pretty bad. The Spanish Inquisition was absolutely morally corrupt. But yeah, we had bad actors in the past. But the point is this is just a small, tiny little number of people who passed away under those ideas than the 120 million from last century. So it's 120 million dwarfs the others.
SJ, Blaster Master 80 says, SJ, you better correct him on this. Correct G-Man on this, I guess. I don't know what he wants you to correct me on.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure. Lived in Korea. It's called. Okay, so North Korea's leaders are gods. Yeah, they think they're gods, and they want the people to worship them. So Kim Jong-un wants people to think he is a god. Okay, that's certainly true.
But he's still an atheist, though. That's the funny thing about it.
Yeah.
I can name several YouTubers on here that the people that are watching this are quite familiar with, who believe that you can be an atheist and believe that a human being is a god at the same time. And I can tell you a whole religion that does that. SJ, you want to know who they are? They're called Levian Satanists. They say that they're their own gods and goddesses on the earth. and they claim to be atheists. So just because Kim Jong-un claims that he's his own God, if you use the definition that these atheists are using here on YouTube, you know what I mean, he would still be calculated as an atheist since they only reject supernatural beings. Because if Master Blaster is saying that Kim Jong-un is a god, then he's not an atheist no more. You see how this works? And then what they'll say is, I'm not really saying he's a literal god, I'm saying he's claiming to be one. You know what I mean? So atheists love to change definitions and try to change the narrative to get themselves out of trouble. Fact of the matter is, you got a madman over there in North Korea that's pointing nuclear weapons at everybody because they want to be noticed.
Yeah,
you know,
he's crazy. So okay, so here we go. And he's so crazy. He was upset that Hollywood made a film about him, making fun of him. Like paying a little too much attention to us. All right, here we go.
The mutilation community is entirely religious. I wouldn't say that the child abuse community is entirely religious. I wouldn't. But it's bidding to be entirely religious. It operates on the old Latin slogan, no child's behind left. How dare anybody, how dare anyone who speaks for religion say of us, the secular and the non-believers, that we are the immoral ones? It is itself a wicked thing to say. Itself an absolutely indefensible
How can he even judge
thing to say. No.
How can he judge
The
how can he judge something as wicked to say if he has a relative moral system, meaning that it's just his opinion? If there's no absolute or objective standard against which to make judgments of what's right and wrong, which is what he's claiming, because he's saying there's no God, there's no moral lawgiver, how can he try to determine if something is wicked? He's actually going against his own views. He's giving us evidence that his claims are incorrect.
I think that timestamp where he actually got all passionate about that was at 47 and 10 seconds and 47 and 13. Oh Lord, I got a video coming for that one, because I'm gonna follow up everything that these people have done over the last 100 years and show them that what he just said was ridiculous.
Yeah,
I implore the people watching this, do some research and you'll see what we're talking about.
Yeah, I also want to say, Master Blaster, he said, no, I would never, you weren't saying that every single shooter in recent times has been an atheist. You were just saying that some of them have been, right? That's
I'm saying that
some of them, like the ones that went into the church.
Yeah, some of them went into the church, and there was 2 instances where they went into the schools and they were shooting little kids. One of them happened in Boston, and then there was another instance. I forget the city, but if you want next week, the next time we get together, actually, I'll give you the receipts of what I'm talking about.
Okay, yeah. So he's got some specific. He's making some specific claims on specific people. He's not saying that every single one of them is. You know, that's the thing. He's not saying every single one of them. So I think I just wanted to make sure that Master Blaster realized that. Okay, so here we go.
Decapitation on the bus is going to be done by someone who thinks God is telling him to do it. Smerdyakov is actually the stupidest character in Dostoevsky's novel. He's the one who makes this proposition. Everyone has to understand that it is those who feel that the divine is prompting them, who feel they're permitted anything and everything. And it is those who are the leading, most salient, most violent, most vicious opponents of the values and civilization that Thomas Jefferson stood for and promulgated.
This guy's doing a lot of butt kissing with the whole Thomas Jefferson references.
Well, I want to point out something that a lot of people don't realize. A lot of people like to accentuate Thomas Jefferson because he was a deist, but they also ignore the fact that 51 of 55 founding fathers were Christians, believers. Okay, so they were believers. Not necessarily. I didn't say Christians. They were theists. 51 of the 55 founding fathers in the United States were theists. Okay, various sects of Christianity and some other groups. And so, just to point that out, so don't let people think that our nation was founded on principles that essentially came out of Christianity. And so, a lot of people have admitted that who are agnostics, like Tom Holland.
Right. And a lot of our major universities were started by theists and not atheists. So when they go around saying that we're stupid and we don't know anything, that's an important piece of information that they need to try to remember.
Yeah, Harvard. I mean, a lot of the Oxford, a lot of the Ivy League schools were founded by Christians, by Christian priests in some cases. So we've got definitely a lot of good universities came out of Christian principles. So let's see what else he says.
Just on the question of fine-tuning, I have a number of responses. We'll have to postpone some of the naturalistic questions for later, when I know they'll come up again. You mentioned Edwin Hubble and the way that he saw the red light shift and saw that the universe was not just expanding, but expanding very fast away from itself, that the Big Bang had not stopped. Lawrence Krauss, great physicist, probably the next Nobel Prize winner, has noticed that most of people's assumption was wrong. That though this expansion was taking place, it was thought, the rate of speed of the expansion must surely be.
By the way, quick statement about Lawrence Krauss. Since religion is responsible for some of the most heinous crimes, I think it's a well-known fact now that Mr. Lawrence Krauss got a problem with his hands and sexual harassment within your community, guys, that you're watching this. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go to Christina Rad's YouTube channel, and yes, she's an atheist and an extremely popular one on top of that, and go listen to her testimony. And then there are other people that got the same testimony of Mr. Lawrence Krauss. I'm not taking away from his scientific know-how or whatever. I'm just saying that Mr. Krauss has issues with keeping his hands to himself. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah. There are actually a lot of people, unfortunately, in the atheist community who have some of those issues. Unfortunately, we still see that in the Christian community too. You probably heard about the University Liberty president who was, his wife was cheating on him with the pool guy. Did you hear about that?
Mm-hmm.
So that was a kind of a bad deal for Christians, is having a representative of Christianity and his wife unfortunately doing that. And so that's something that's out there. But what's interesting to me is I've seen some atheists respond to that whole issue with the Liberty president. And they've said, well, wait a second, if they were believers in polyamory, this would not be an issue because you're allowed to have an open marriage according to their philosophy.
Now, you know what it is, SJ? I think the atheists make a mistake sometimes. I mean, then again, maybe we do too. But they make a mistake when they try to sit there and say religious people do this and theists do this and theists do that, as if we can't do the same thing with them. Again, it doesn't prove that God doesn't exist. These are anti-theistic arguments. You know what I mean? These are misotheistic arguments as well.
Yeah.
None of these arguments, like honestly, how many arguments has he made in his opening statement where he can say that this is a good argument for God not existing?
Yeah, I want to point out what he's saying with Lawrence Krauss, also with what he's saying right here with this particular argument, is here's what we know. We know that the universe is expanding, but it's also expanding at faster rates than initially. So initially it was expanding a little bit. It keeps getting faster and faster and faster over time. That's what they know. Lawrence Krauss wrote a book called A Universe from Nothing. And he makes a proposition that the whole universe, time, space, and matter, had a start date, but prior to that, nothing existed. Now, then what he does is he actually creates a wave pattern in particles that he claims existed prior to the universe beginning. So essentially, there's something prior, but he's got a book called Universe from Nothing. So his book is clickbait because it's got a title that he refutes himself within the book, talking about particles and a vacuum and his whole theory of how the universe began and what was present prior to time, space, and matter. So what he's doing is just trying to create his own little game here, and that's what Christopher's going to jump on here. So, all right, so let's hear.
And the thing that I want to say about, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The thing I want to say about that, if you guys watch GTV later this week, we're actually going to be talking about this stuff because Lawrence Krauss actually, I believe he's the one that I'm thinking. He actually refutes himself in his own book. And I think actually just got finished talking about it, but he does refute himself in his own book. So we'll talk about that. That's what he does.
Okay, yeah, good.
No, says Krauss, he's pointed it out and now it's agreed by all. No, the Hubble rate of red light shift is increasing. The universe is dissipating itself at high speed and the speed is getting greater. What does this mean? Well, it answers the question of why is there something instead of nothing? Because now we have something. We're all here because there's something. And nothing is coming right for us. Very soon, a physicist wouldn't be able to tell the Big Bang had ever taken place. So far.
This doesn't even make sense. We know that the universe is in a process of decay. Right? We know that the universe is in a process of decay. We know that from matter. Matter always decays. People decay. Okay. We decay over time as we get older, and then one day we die. And the same exact thing is going on with the universe. The universe is eventually going to die a heat death. And that's what we know from science. And that's also what we know from God. And so in the book of Revelation, we were told the universe is going to die from a heat death. We're also told that from our scientists today.
If something comes from nothing, then how does cause and effect work in the laws of nature? That is just, oh Lord, that's illogical. That doesn't make any sense.
No, doesn't make sense. All right, let's see what he says.
Sprung apart will the whole system be? And meanwhile, look in the sky at night and you can see the Andromeda Galaxy headed straight for ours on a direct collision course. Who designed that? Who made it certain that every...
Okay, so here's one of those, the incredulity argument, the idea of just because we see something going on where it looks like the Andromeda Galaxy is approaching us, therefore God doesn't exist, because he wouldn't have designed something where the Andromeda Galaxy would be heading for us. That's an argument, a fallacy of incredulity.
All right.
So I'll just point that out. So he's and this is another one of those things. Atheists like to point out a lot of times, well, why would God make an appendix? The appendix isn't even being used. Or why would God make a throat that's right next to your lungs? And this all of this stuff going on. God made an imperfect body. If he's a perfect God, why would he make an imperfect body? Well, let's speak to what God's purpose is. It's not for us to be around for more than 120 years. And
God is perfect. In his, okay, first of all, in the book of Genesis, when God finished creating everything, and this is the mistake that atheists make all the time, right? When God finished creating everything, he said he called his creation good, right? He didn't say it was perfect, he said it was good, right? And this is something we used to do to them in the great debate years. Oh God, they used to hate this. So God said everything was good. God alone is perfect. Okay? When God created water, I don't think he created it I'm just piggybacking off that shit. He didn't create it with the intention of it being perfect.
Yeah.
You understand? But it had a use for what he was going to use it for, or whatever. You know what I mean? It had a purpose,
exactly.
And it was going to be used for something. So a lot of these questions that they be asking, they're always saying that we're the illogical ones, but they're the ones asking all this illogical stuff that is based on faulty information. It's like, where are they getting this from?
I want to say something that I thought of earlier that I was also thinking of when you were talking before, is this idea of atheists themselves. A lot of atheists will say, hey, why am I here? Why would God create me if he knows that I'm going to choose hell? He knows that I'm not going to choose to worship him. Why would God even create me in the first place? And I actually thought about this a lot. And I thought about why I came back to Christianity and why I started writing and why I've been writing blogs and doing YouTube videos and doing what I do on Twitter, is because a lot of times I'm countering atheists. Had it not been for the atheist to strengthen my faith and sharpen my sword, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. You see, I see a purpose that God has for the atheist. Sorry, atheists, but you're making us stronger in our Christian faith.
Exactly.
So that's
again, he's not making arguments that would suggest that God isn't real. These arguments are, I'm not going to be your servant. I'm not going to serve you. You're a hateful, vengeful God. It's like there's no argument there that would suggest that he isn't real or whatever.
No, I agree. Hey, G-Man, I'm just noticing the time here. It's just about 6, which I should probably head out. Should we listen to just another second here of his stuff and maybe one last comment and go from there?
Sure. And then you choose when we end it, since you're the one that has to go. You can do it.
All right. Sounds good.
All right.
Every other planet in our solar system is either too hot or too cold to support life, as is most of our own planet. And that in just one tiny, irrelevant solar system already condemned to heat death and implosion. Some design, wouldn't you say?
So he doesn't like the design? Therefore, there must not be a designer. I have to say, G-Man, have you been to the beaches or the mountains or some of the beautiful stuff that we've seen on the earth, or looked into the sky and seen rainbows, or just seen this beautiful galaxy? A lot of this stuff is such beauty, and our sense of inner beauty and our apprehension of beauty is something that's God-given.
Yeah, I've been to Bear Mountain. I've been to a few places. You know what I mean? And I have no issue with God's design. Like the things that I appreciate, like when I look in the sky, when I look at the moon, the stars, the mountains, the oceans, and everything. It's just like God's like canvas. You know what I mean? And everything that we see here is his artwork. And what he's talking about is like, hey, I don't like how these Nikes look. Therefore, the Nike company doesn't exist. It's like, come on, man, seriously.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, so I'm going to go ahead. I see Blaster Master says, can he come on as a counter opinion? Yeah, we can do this where Blaster Master comes in to have we need an atheist representative, right, G-Man?
Oh yeah, that'd be great. Even though we were listening to an atheist, but I'm pretty sure they can fill in the gaps or whatever when we're getting ready to do this or whatever.
So, okay.
Christopher
Yes.
Hitchens was supposed to be one of the best ever. I'm a little disappointed. So.
Well, you know what we've seen though is you'll see Hitchens get up there. When he came out with some of these arguments, these were the first times that people had heard them. All of his acolytes are following those arguments today. So now when we hear those, they sound like, oh, come on, we've already refuted that silliness. But a lot of people copied his ideas because those were kind of novel back then.
Oh, okay, I understand now. I'm not being fair because when he was alive, I wasn't even on YouTube, I don't think. So, yeah, it's all right. Cool.
Oh, no, I don't think you're being, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that I mean, he has a lot of people following him still today, reading his books, doing his stuff. And so, but now we know that, anyway, I won't say what I was saying before about Hitchens being very aware of God right now. But G-Man, tell us what you're working on right now and how people can find you.
Everybody can go to my YouTube channel, the G-Man channel. I got a Hebrew Israelite video I'm going to be uploading. We're going to be talking about woe unto the moderate Hebrew Israelites. We'll be doing that in 1 hour. And I'm looking forward to doing that. Subscribe to S.J. Thomas and my YouTube channel as soon as possible. That's all I
Yeah, you'll see the link to G-Man in my description. You'll definitely see, I always have a permanent link down there. So go ahead and please subscribe to G-Man. Please subscribe here if you haven't yet. I really appreciate all of you guys for coming on. Even if you come on with all different opinions, I see that in the chat, we're probably half represented by theists and half by atheists. And so that's welcome because of course we want to open the doors and let everybody offer opinions, even if we don't agree with the opinions. We do like the fact that you're paying attention to us.
Actually, I do have to go. I have to go do something. Somebody's knocking on the door again, and it's kind of hard to focus. But please subscribe to S.J. Thomas's YouTube channel. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Go to the G-Man channel in about an hour. You'll see what I'm going to be doing over there. And God bless every last one of you.
God bless everybody. So Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. No one gets to the Father except through the Son. Thank God. You guys have a great day. Yeah, please hit the like. Thank you, Jesse. And bye-bye.